Hello, people of Connecticut, my fellow nutmeggers. My name is Selena Rifkin, and this is Make Connecticut Healthy Again. A little bit about me. I have a master's in nutrition and over 25 years of experience finding and eating real, non-processed food. But even though I have a degree and wrote a thesis, I don't expect you to just take my word for anything. I will always put sources in the show notes, and I urge you to do your own research. Today, I'm going to talk about bread. I have in my hands right now a loaf of bread that my husband chose for a guest who came to visit us. He thought this was a good quality brand, and our guest didn't end up eating any of it. So it sat on top of the fridge for a month before I remembered that it was there. See, I don't eat bread, at least not that kind. In the year 2000, and that is actually 25 years ago now, I decided to try going off gluten. Gluten gives dough its elastic, stretchy texture, and it helps baked goods hold their shape, acting like a natural glue. It's found in wheat, rye, barley, and a few other grains, like spelt. And some of the nutrition reading I was doing at that time was suggesting that it might be what was causing my chronic digestive issues. So after a month, this bread looked pretty much the same. No mold, still looked fresh. So my husband looks at me and he says, "This is an experiment now, isn't it?" Yeah, well, of course, he knows me so well. But I should tell you that my guest didn't visit a month ago. And I'll tell you how long it's been after I unwrap this, because we're going to unwrap this on camera. And I've been waiting, and I was going to wait a little longer, but I've absolutely run out of patience, and we need to do this today. But first, let's do a little history. The earliest bread was from the Natufian culture. That's Natufian. That was around 14,000 years ago. This bread was made from einkorn wheat, which was a very simple kind of grass. It actually had fewer chromosomes than the wheat that we eat today. That was ground up and mixed with the roots of a plant from the sedge family that grew in shallow water, which was similar to cattail roots. So it was kind of a paste, and then they would bake it on flat stones called flatbread. So the Natufians settled in what's now the Jordanian desert about 4,000 years before the start of actual agriculture. Then wheat, barley, and other grains were domesticated approximately 10,000 years ago when the climate changed and the food sources changed and there were more people and they were hungry. But up until the discovery of leavening, they pretty much all cooked flatbread on stones. It was the Egyptians who discovered leavening, probably from yeast that settled on beer mash because they made beer. And those lighter risen loaves became central to the economy and were even buried in tombs as grave goods. By 1700 BCE, the Greeks had developed the first commercial bakeries, and Rome turned this into an entire industry with a variety of breads, including the lightest breads for the elite. That particular piece had continued into the Middle Ages, where guilds regulated baking and laws controlled the weight of the bread, the quality, and the prices. The elites ate wheat, while the peasants got bread made from rye, barley, and oats. Starting in the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution created finer milling, and commercial yeast and steam ovens drastically increased production. Bread and wheat products are now something that most people in the US can't even imagine living without, which is why my husband had to buy bread for a guest. I sometimes have gluten-free bread in the house. Here's an example. But people who are used to gluten don't find this bread acceptable. It tends to be a little more crumbly. It doesn't have the same soft texture, and it definitely has a different mouthfeel. So I'm not going to make you wait until the end of this podcast to open this thing up because the suspense has actually been killing me. So I'm going to open it up first, and I'm going to tell you how long it's been sitting. So I've only looked at the outside, I promise. and I haven't opened it to peek at it before the podcast. So let's first, let's see. Okay, so I found the expiration date. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but we're going to get out a piece of this bread out of the bag. Let's get one from the middle. So here it is. Check this out. So looks pretty good. Looks tasty, right? Yeah. It's soft. See, you can squish it with your fingers. Um, no, smells like bread, I guess. It's very it looks completely fresh to me. I'm actually gonna tear it. See, looks completely fresh. Okay, so let's go with the expiration date. The expiration date on this package says June 30th, 25. We bought this bread in April. I'm going to hold this up to the camera. I know it's upside. It's going to be backwards, but at least you can see what it looks like. Hopefully that shows up okay. So I'm going to bring it back and forward a little bit so you guys can maybe see it. So why on earth would bread still look like this after, what is this, 9 months? It's almost a year, 10 months. How far are we from April? Yeah, 10 months. About 10 months that this has been sitting around. And it looks exactly the same as it did when we bought it. That's creepy. I'm sorry. It's creepy. So I've let that other bread go. And like I said, I don't eat that very often. It will take me quite a long time to go through that one loaf. And if I take too long, it will get moldy. It definitely gets moldy or it gets dry and I have to turn it into, croutons. So why would this bread hold up so damn well? Okay, let's read the ingredients. Okay, we have enriched wheat flour, malted barley flour, reduced iron niacin thiamine mononitrate, vitamin B, that would be vitamin B, riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, folic acid, water, yeast, salt, sugar, vegetable oil, soybean. That's an issue, but we'll get into that at another podcast. Wheat gluten, preservatives, calcium okay, this one's a tough one. Calcium propionate, sorbic acid, date M. I don't is I datum datum monoglycerides, soy lecithin, citric acid, grain vinegar, and sesame seeds. So I took the opportunity to look up sodium propionate. Oh no, wait, nope. Hang on. Calcium propionate. I took the opportunity to look that up because I had a feeling it was going to be like this. So sodium propionate is a very common ingredient in bread, and what it does is it kills mold and bacteria. So let's talk about that. How digestible is something that has preservatives in it? Just because you put something in your mouth and chew it up and swallow it doesn't mean that your body gets anything out of it. In fact, you better be getting more out of what you put in your mouth than the energy it takes to break it down and digest. And there are some foods that are so free of nutrients that they actually cost your body more to digest than you get out of them. And what if some of those ingredients actually have an adverse effect on one of our carefully balanced biological systems? Because we are not as flexible as we like to think each other, and we didn't evolve with calcium propionate. Our bodies don't know what to do with that. Humans started eating bread in its earliest form because it was easy food and readily available. Well, easy relative to perhaps going out and traveling miles and miles and miles to try and catch something meat oriented. It was right in front of them usually. But 14,000 years ago, it still wasn't our primary source of calories. At that point, we were still mostly eating meat. But once we switched to agriculture, the average human height dropped by 2 to 6 inches, depending on our location. We shrunk when we started eating wheat primarily. Our bones became less dense. Iron deficiency anemia was common. Knee arthritis doubled. Our jaws literally shrank. The microorganisms in the mouth and colon changed, and there was much more tooth decay and dental abscesses. They could tell all this from the archaeological record. The tooth decay by itself is really telling. Before we started consuming seeds and the seeds of grasses, tooth decay was uncommon, and it affected only 1 to 3% of all the teeth recovered in anthropological digs. And that's without toothbrushes, dental floss, dentists, or dental insurance. Hunter-gatherers had perfectly straight, healthy teeth, even in old age, and yeah, they lived into their 50s, 60s, and 70s, contrary to popular opinion. The consumptions of seeds allowed for survival for a few more days or weeks, but it was responsible for consequences months or years later. So calcium propionate is a common preservative in breads and muffins, and what it does is actually disrupts the metabolism of mold and bacteria, which is all very well as long as it's outside your body. What you're about to put that in I'm sorry. When you're about to put that into your small intestine, where 80% of your gut bacteria that runs your immune system lives, that might not be such a good idea. I'm going to do a whole post on gut bacteria. In fact, I'm going to be doing more than one because it's a really big subject. But for now, let's just say this is an emerging field and it has critical importance for our health. And speaking of gut bacteria, there's something that gets sprayed on almost all wheat crops in the US and in the UK, for that matter, that also disrupts gut bacteria, and that's glyphosate. In wet climates, glyphosate is used to kill off a wheat crop so that it'll be dry and be harvestable in a less risky schedule. Glyphosate is Roundup, which has been implicated in various lawsuits, and yet it still gets sprayed on our food. It seems like we might be once again sacrificing long-term health for short-term gains, and in this case, the only gain is that eating it feels good for a few minutes. Homo sapiens sapiens has been around for about 300,000 years, and before that, we spent 2 million years evolving while eating mostly meat. Our digestive systems aren't built to handle seeds. Even herbivores don't eat a lot of seeds. Herbivores eat grass and leaves, but they only get seeds occasionally when they're ripe. Seeds are loaded with enzymes and antidigestants, and the purpose of that is to prevent the seed from being broken down into an herbivore's gut so it can be deposited on the ground later with a nice pile of fertilizer. So wheat also has built-in pest-resistant protein called wheat germ agglutinin. That's one of the two primary families of proteins that make up gluten. Because modern plant breeding techniques are always focused on greater production and more pest control, modern wheat has a great deal more agglutinin than the einkorn wheat that our ancestors ate. This particular protein is completely indigestible for humans, and it's a potent toxin. If bugs die when they eat it, how can we argue that it's actually good for us? 1 milligram of agglutinin fed to lab animals results in extensive damage to the intestinal lining. The second family of proteins that makes up gluten are gliadins. These are the proteins that usually trigger immune responses like celiac. The straightforward response for people who have celiac is to not eat gluten at all, but even people not diagnosed with celiac have problems with gluten and other components of seeds that we're not evolved to deal with. For example, beans are also seeds. What happens to most people when they eat beans? That gas, bloating, and other intestinal distress is the result of the body trying to deal with things it can't use. Another compound meant to provide pest resistance in seeds are phytates. They're present in all seeds, including beans, but phytates bind minerals, including iron, zinc, magnesium, and calcium, which causes chronic deficiencies. And pretty much everyone in the US is deficient in magnesium, and not just because of consuming seed foods like bread, but also because magnesium is now deficient in the soil. So I'm going to tell you what happened when I stopped eating wheat 25 years ago. For my whole life, up until that point, I had trouble being interested in food and I had chronic nausea after eating. After 2 weeks of not eating wheat, I had something I never had in my entire life, an appetite. All of a sudden, I was eating because it felt good, not because I had to keep my energy up. Not feeling ill after meals, it was so strange and it was so amazing. And that was just one step toward long-term wellness. And there are plenty of gluten-free options available now that there weren't 25 years ago. I would suggest that simply swapping out whatever volume of gluten products with gluten-free shouldn't be your last step. It wasn't for me. There's a way more sources of inflammation than gluten. I think I'm going to throw this bread out now. So start a healthy habit, start walking daily, get outside, get rid of something bad. Stop eating something that's bad for you. You are needed. Your family needs you. Your community needs you. Let's make Connecticut healthy again, and I'll see you next week.